folks, and welcome to another episode of the Ancient Andes podcast. It is Monday, November 15th, another beautiful day here in colorful Colorado. Today, we are going to be talking about the fortress of Waqrapukara, located in the Acomayo Province of Cusco, Peru. Shout out to the hometown of my favorite musical group, Conde Maite de Acomayo. The hilltop fortress is the crown jewel of the Acomayo Province. It is located in the Acos district, and it is stepped with wide grassy terraces all the way up. There's an ancient stone staircase that winds its way to the top of this amazing site. Waqrapukara consists of a citadel in the middle of a rocky spur. Think of it as an almost island in the sky type of vibe, where there are two groups of enclosures that are separated by a large central space. This is surrounded by the 8 artificial terraces with retaining walls that follow the topography, and a series of enclosures on the east and western end. Its temples, located in the highest part, are what truly stand out. Right in the middle of these 2 large rocky mounds that look like llama ears or horns, the site rises up majestically from a deep ravine at a whopping 4,300 meters above sea level. That's 14,100 feet for all you North Americans. To put this into perspective, the elevation of Machu Picchu is just 2,430, or roughly 8,000 feet. The peaks of the Andean mountain range stretch out as far as the eye can see, and intense gusts of wind come spiraling up from the canyon below. Far down at the bottom of the canyon, the winding path of the Apurimac River can be seen carving its way. There are at least 4 different ancient trails that lead to the site. So what's in a name? The name Waqrapukara originates from the Quechua language. Waqra meaning horn and Pukara describing a defensive fortification. So it roughly translates to horn-shaped fortress. It's not hard to see how it might have earned this name. The distinct form of the structure looks like a kind of crown sat on top of a mountain peak, or like 2 prong-shaped horns. The name is a bit of a riddle, however, as back in the times of the Inca and before, South America was not home to any bulls or cows, or creatures that had horns like this. Cattle were introduced by the Spaniards, who didn't invade until the 16th century. So why would it be named after the shape of a horn? There is another name for Waqrapukara that is used by the locals. Jamapukara is used for the site and offers another interpretation of the citadel's iconic shape. It could be said to look not like 2 horns, but like 2 upright ears of a llama. This is quite feasible, as llama were considered sacred animals by the Incas. They were used for carrying packs, their wool was used for textiles, and they were also sacrificed at significant ceremonies. It wouldn't be the only historical site likened to the shape of an animal. Machu Picchu is said to be shaped like a bird, and Cusco was built in the shape of a puma. These likenesses would have been deeply symbolic. Some people believe that animal spirits watch over ancient sites like this one, and that it's the spirit of the llama that is present at Waqrapukara. This is a site that is far less visited than Machu Picchu. Not many people realize that aside from Machu Picchu, there are countless lesser-known enigmatic sites located in the Cusco region in southern Peru. One of the most impressive is Waqrapukara. Waqrapukara in Peru has only recently been discovered. It was just made a National Cultural Heritage Site in 2017. So what about the architecture and the layout of this site? The Waqrapukara fortress is divided into 2 main zones, the upper and lower zone. The upper zone is characterized by the higher quality buildings. We can see here double and triple jamb doors, as well as niches that serve for ornamentation and offerings for ceremonies. Only the most important sites in the Inca Empire had triple jamb doors. These are highly significant and symbolic and found only in places of extreme ceremonial importance. You can get here by going up a series of stairs. Think of it as almost like a stairway to heaven. The lower area is characterized by the presence of a series of platforms whose dimensions reach around 6 feet high. They also have minor buildings with characteristics of the Kanchis culture. This is the original builders. There are also stone steps that lead to the highest or religious sector, Una Waka. This is where there is a precipice looking straight out over into the valley, and there's a rock or a stone there where they used to do sacrifices. It's definitely the most energetic part of the site. Very, very incredible. I spent about 15 minutes there just meditating. These ruins are clustered around the two central towering peaks, the horns or the llama ears. And around these, you can find other passageways, ceremonial halls, a few other rooms. All of these architectural elements indicate that this was a site of profound significance to the Incas. This was a special place of ceremony, religion, and political importance. In between the two horns, there's a natural cave with a little window that gives an incredible view over the valley. Surrounding this hill is a series of the 8 enclosed terraces that step their way down the hillside. They're linked by stone stairways and amazingly preserved walls. In some places, you can see ancient cave paintings of herd animals, such as South American camelids like vicuñas, alpacas, and of course, llamas. These probably are pre-Incan, but the Incas had a special skill for blending their structures into the natural landscape. And this is what makes sites like Machu Picchu and Waqrapukara so breathtaking. At first glance, you might not even notice or spot the artificial bits at all. The buildings are constructed on cliff faces and precipices, perfectly integrated. The stonework seems to meld seamlessly into the rock formations of the area, simultaneously celebrating both the natural features and the ceremonial masonry. The ancient beginnings. The beauty of Waqrapukara is in its intrigue and mystery, but that does not mean that much of the historical fact around the site is fairly speculative. Because it is a pretty recent discovery, the truth behind these stones is still being deciphered, which is very exciting indeed. But what do we know already about this unusual site? How old actually is it, and what was it built for? We don't yet know the exact date the fortress harks back to, but it is thought amazingly that it predates the Incas by a long time. It's said that the site was originally a small citadel called Waqrapukara, built by and for the Kanchi people, possibly in a date range of 1500 to 1000 BC. The Kanchi's culture, which coexisted with the Incas, was established south of the city of Cusco. Both groups battled for control of the region. They also joined forces to fight their common enemies, the Chancas. Thus, the Kanchis ended up allying with the Incas in the period of Inca expansion. The Incas built the most perfect temples and enclosures in the area around Waqrapukara. Legend has it that the Inca general Tito Cosnipa, who had his army in Kanchis, rebelled against the Inca emperor Huayna Capac. An Inca army cornered him, but the warrior took refuge in Waqrapukara fortress, where he managed to easily defeat his enemies due to the special geography in the upper part of the mountain. The Inca emperor cut off his water supply and forced him to surrender. As punishment, the Inca spared his life but cut off one of his ears. Let's talk a little bit more about this tale. According to legend, the Kanchi people were ruled by Tito Cosnipa, who was a sort of rebel Inca, who fought with the Kanchis against the other Inca on the slopes of Mount Pinapaimpa. Sorry, I butchered that. The Kanchi were defeated and fled to Waqrapukara, which was placed under siege for 15 days. Tito Cosnipa was forced to capitulate, but in exchange for swearing loyalty to the Inca, he and his warriors were spared from execution. As punishment for the Kanchi's defiance, the Inca selected 100 Kanchi warriors and cut off one ear, marking them as Modo Kanchis. Years later, Tito Cosnipa was one of the most courageous and faithful warriors of the Inca. All right, so now I'm going to tell you guys about my personal experience there. I met this awesome guy named Sergey when I was working at a hostel in Cusco. Sergey and I started talking about all of these magnificent places around the Cusco region, and I showed him some pictures of Waqrapukara and expressed my desire to go there. He was fully on board. So we searched for a taxi driver in Cusco and started making some offers. We found a driver on the streets who was driving an old station wagon. God bless his soul, he had no idea where we were about to take him. I explained to him that we needed to get to Sangarara near Acomayo, and he agreed to take us there for about $80. It was actually a really good price for where he ended up dropping us off. We left Cusco at about 5 in the morning and arrived at the bridge Puente Chuquicawan after about 2 hours of driving. And from there, it was another 30 to 40 minutes past the lake of Pomacanchi and into the town of Sangarara. This whole region is full of history and archaeological sites. The Battle of Sangarara was fought on November 18th, 1780 in Sangarara, between rebel forces under Tupac Amaru II and Spanish colonial forces under Tiburcio Landa. Tupac Amaru II's forces won decisively. We took the desafío to Acomayo Lake. My apologies, guys. It's a little difficult to pronounce these names if you're not reading them all the time. After a number of muddy switchbacks, we continued our steady ascent with Pablo, our driver, who was becoming more hesitant by the moment. He kept saying, "Aquí está bien? Está bien aquí? Is this good? Is here okay?" I said, "Un poquito más," just a little bit further. I was watching our location on Google Earth and couldn't believe how good of a starting point we were going to get. Then it started to snow. We finally decided to put Pablo out of his misery, and we unpacked our bags, helped him get turned back around, and paid him. We were now deep in the heavy clouds in the middle of a snowstorm at an elevation of about 11,000 feet. I reassured myself that it wasn't that bad and that Pablo was going to be fine getting home, but I still wasn't certain. We came around a few more switchbacks where we met a teenager and his horses. I offered him some coca leaves and he was very grateful. I asked him for directions and he showed us the way, and he also offered to take our bags for a small price. In hindsight, this was the way to go, as we would have had a personal guide and a lot less of a load to carry. But Sergey and I were up for the adventure, so we kindly declined. We found a few campers by the Acomayo Lake. This is where the trailhead that we were going to take begins. There are at least 4 ancient trails to get to Waqrapukara. None of them are easy, although I've heard the route from Santa Lucia has less elevation. We started our gradual climb up from the lake, and we were still deep in the fogs and clouds on a snowy trail that was quite slippery. After a few hundred meters, I looked back with no sight of Sergey. My poor friend was already starting to feel that I had sent him on a death march into the mist of the Peruvian Andes. I had never been on this trail before, but was confident I had a good idea of where we were headed, due to the hours of obsessive browsing through maps over the area through the years. Beautiful views at the highest points into the surrounding valley and the lakes. We stopped to admire a few different unique rock formations and small archaeological sites. We saw some wild vicuñas and continued walking. Once we finished walking, we decided to keep walking, and we did some more walking after that. Yeah, you get the point. It was a long walk. After about 2 hours uphill, we started to begin heading down into the valley, alongside a small creek that the vicuña were drinking from. We came across a corral and a beautiful waterfall. This was our first view into the valley, and I began to cry. I couldn't believe how magnificent it was. I had dreamed of being here for so many years, and now here I was, standing in awe of this magnificent canyon. The massive canyon with its cathedral-like walls on all sides was something out of an ancient adventure like Indiana Jones or something. We finally arrived at the site after about 6 hours of casual walking/hiking. When we arrived, we were in awe of the site's massive size and precarious location. We looked up and saw the most magical thing